Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar for the Property Alliance. Silna, welcome again.
Hi.
Um, we decided today to deviate from our normal routine of having it live on Facebook in the afternoon. The reason being that not a lot has happened over the last week, so we don't want to bore our viewers with unnecessary repetition. But we did think that we jump in, speak about very relevant things that are happening, maybe for a shorter period, and just keep you guys up to date so you know what is happening. You know that we're still going on a weekly basis, trying to get the job done for our clients. And yeah, that you know what to expect if you are looking to do evictions or you have any property related issues.
Brilliant,
Yeah,
Bruno. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
That's good. It's so weird to have the Wednesday webinar while the sun is still out.
Absolutely.
I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised with the
Yeah.
pre-recorded thing. And now I know because we're pre-recording, now I know if we accidentally mess up, we can edit it out. So less pressure tonight.
The problem is we don't have the time to do that. So if we make a mistake,
Well, the reason why we're pre-recording.
yeah.
Alrighty, so we've discussed a little bit before the time now what we need to talk about. We don't have any specific questions on the Property Law Alliance page, but I do know that there is a lot of questions around evictions, and I think, like you said, I think it's a good conversation to have. What are we seeing? What's happening? Because I think there's still this perception that evictions are stayed even in level 3, and we've discussed it at length last week, that we can proceed with evictions. But what are you seeing on your side?
So it's interesting. So there's a couple of scenarios that are playing out, especially now, what people consider as coming out of the COVID lockdown, because a lot of people feel that things are back to normal. So what are we doing now? And obviously, tenants are now allowed to move, and landlords are trying to now make the necessary arrangements. Some of the tenants may have been retrenched. So there are still financial issues that are being experienced. So on the defaulting tenant side, I'm not necessarily saying bad tenants, but just the defaulting tenant side, there's a lot of negotiations as to what a person needs to pay, when they intend to move out, how long are they going to be allowed to stay on the property, et cetera, what to do about utilities. And so I'm finding a trend there that landlords do need to be educated on how to deal with this. And I think that's the topic we're going to explore now, on what's the right way of doing it, what's the most cautious way, what's the cheapest way, and how would each play out. And then touching on that, or very connected to that, is those matters that do land up going to an eviction process. What are we seeing from the court side? And like I mentioned to you earlier, just going on that second topic, I'm experiencing, personally, I'm experiencing that the courts aren't necessarily giving as much attention to the eviction applications as they are to my normal applications. So I'm finding that I'm issuing other applications like sequestration applications and getting dates sooner than I am on my eviction application. So it's almost like they've prioritized one above the other, because the evictions, maybe they feel that nothing can happen right now, which we know is not true, but it doesn't feel like we're being given as much priority as some of the other matters. I don't know if you're finding the same.
Well, I've just had a conversation with one of my associates. We had a matter on the roll for tomorrow, and in Joburg High Court. So matter is on the roll for tomorrow. She called the registrar just now to ask why she hasn't received a Zoom link yet,
Yeah.
what's happening. And the registrar said, no, the rolls are too full. And she said, what? That is not the answer you get the day before the time. And currently, as we sit here at like close to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we're theoretically supposed to be enrolled for tomorrow. But the registrar just said she can't tell us if the matter is going to be heard tomorrow. It's an unopposed eviction. So theoretically, there shouldn't be any reason why we're not on the roll for tomorrow. But I've seen that, and I agree with you, because especially Issuing of new evictions, we had a very big problem in Pretoria Magistrate Court, where the court said they are still operating in terms of level 4 regulations, to which we said,
Yeah.
Askies julle, you're like the only people right now that's still in level 4, but okay. And we were actually able to issue yesterday in Pretoria Mag, but in the High Courts, Pretoria, Cape Town, Joburg, we are able to issue, but I agree with you, it almost feels like the registrars doesn't know exactly how to handle an eviction. So they sort of moving it around, not just on new matters, but also existing matters. We've obtained quite a few eviction orders in the past 2-3 weeks. All of them obviously over Zoom appearances. Ex partes are running actually quite smoothly. But at the same time, it's you need to get the link to get this onto Zoom for your appearance. And one of our other attorneys had to do an appearance earlier this week, and he just didn't get the link. He eventually got the link from another attorney, and he just snuck into that Zoom meeting, and he got his matter heard and got the eviction granted. So I do think at this stage it's the weirdest thing for all of us, and I agree with you. It does feel like evictions are definitely a little bit less priority than other matters, especially divorces and family law matters. They seem to be running like
Smoothly.
there's no problem.
Absolutely. This might actually be a good topic to touch on again next week, and maybe during the course of this week, see if we can get some clarity on this, even if we do it together, just see if we get an answer from somebody, whether it is a fact that evictions are receiving less priority, or whether it's just totally coincidental, and they've grouped it with a bunch of other type of applications that are getting like similar inattention. But it is good to know, because I don't know what to tell my clients at the moment. So because I mean, think about it. The way that evictions work, we're required to issue certain notices with dates placed in them. Without knowing those dates, or without being able to ascertain that it is in fact going to be heard on that date, it almost feels wasted. That notice feels wasted, and then we need to go back and make sure that a new date is allocated, and possibly even have to reserve. There's a lot of ramifications for it not being heard. So it is a bit of a problem. But yeah, maybe next week we can touch on that again.
Exactly. I'd like that, because I think what we need to discuss as well now, and then potentially again in more detail next week, is service by the sheriff. Because we've seen with quite a few sheriffs, no problems, and we are able to serve on new process without too much hassle. But some other sheriffs are coming up with the weirdest excuses not to serve new process. And I must say that's a bit of a concern, because I don't know about you, as much as we can approach the court for alternative service directives, I don't want to put my clients through an extra application process, an extra appearance. I mean, just to bring that application is going to end up costing clients a pretty penny. And I don't know if you're experiencing the same thing, a little bit reluctance from the sheriff as well.
Absolutely. And so from the sheriff, and I mean, we were discussing a short while ago, it just seems like no one really knows what to do. And then if there's cases of COVID, things go completely backwards. So like last week, we mentioned the High Court in Joburg. There was a case, so they had to close down for a couple of days. There was a deeds office in Cape Town. And every court is handling things differently. So one court in Pretoria is doing things one way, whereas another court in Joburg is doing it a different way. So there's a lot of level of uncertainty. And because you're not getting that consistency across the board, it's difficult to tell clients. I mean, generally now, how I advise clients is this is how it happened prior to COVID. So that's best case scenario that we can expect. But please understand there may be variables in the issuing process, obtaining an unopposed date process, the sheriff serving the application, that's also a variable. And even after it's served, actually having the hearing, having an unopposed hearing, or doing the section 4.2, all of these are the different variables. In your case, I know the sheriff, you're okay with the sheriff, but I can't tell you about the court because I don't know yet. I don't know whether it'll be 1 week or 6 weeks that we hear back from the court.
Yes. Yes, and I'm glad we're finding the same thing in different firms, because I know your firm, my firm, pushing equally hard to get the eviction orders for our clients. And I must say, I am there where I'm starting to think my clients must think I'm coming up with the weirdest stories. So I'm so happy that you're saying the same thing, because, for instance, this client that's on the roll for tomorrow. Oh yes, we're hoping they're watching this.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jelle.
I'm going to send this link to some of my clients. Like, see, I'm not lying.
It's not just us, because we try, and it's different in every single court and every single sheriff. And some of our evictions are running smoothly, like happy, we're getting the orders, everything is fine. Some cases we get easily get it issued, get it served, everything is fine. But at the same time, in other cases, you stand back, everything runs smoothly, and like now, you don't get the Zoom link to do your appearance, or your matter just doesn't get enrolled. And because you're not in court, you can't. I think for the benefit of our viewers, let's explain how that normally works. So usually when you get to court, you look at the court roll, you see your matter is on the roll, not on the roll. When they call the matters, sometimes your file is not on the bench, so the judge or the magistrate doesn't have the file in front of you. What you do then as the attorney is you stand the matter down. What that means, that's lawyer for, tell the magistrate or the judge to give you a moment.
Yeah.
You just sit tight. We in lawyer, we call it stand down. So you stand the matter down, you run out to the clerk or the registrar, you say, hey, I'm looking for my file. Then you go into the back of the filing room, and there's a bunch of files. Sift through the files, you find your file or not. It can really go either way. Then when you have your file, you go back to the court, you get your matter heard. So sometimes when your matter doesn't get enrolled properly, but you are in court, you can get the matter enrolled. However, right now, if you don't get a Zoom link, it's pretty much like being locked out of the courtroom, and you are there, but you can't anything. You can't Zoom the registrar and be like, hello, excuse, I can't find my file. So for us as attorneys, I think it's the most frustrating thing, because we are so used to dealing with matters not being enrolled proper, court files not being in the courtroom. But currently we are stuck over Zoom, and you can't really maneuver that much. So I think the message is quite clear, Bruno. We are trying our absolute best for our clients, from all the firm's sides, but at the same time, I must say it's harder. It's harder to lawyer than it's ever been before. But we are doing our best. And if your attorney is telling you the matter hasn't been enrolled and we don't know why, or if your attorney says the sheriff doesn't want to serve, or if your attorney says I can't get the matter issued, seriously, if Bruno and if our firms can't get these things done, I promise you, your attorney is not lying to you.
Yeah. And I mean, just going on that frustration, I mean, the reality is there's no call center, there's no automated answering system where you can press one and you go to the person that's sitting with the files in front of them. You're going blind, and you're hoping that you get everything correctly. And constantly, anytime that there's something on the roll, we have to run around phoning people that we know, asking if anyone else is on the roll, what they're doing, which judge, and how to get hold of and it is kind of every single matter we're having to wing. And there is no call center, there is no email that you can send and get a quick response to, a WhatsApp number for your convenience, chatbot. It's the court. And that's the downside of this, is it's the court. And even with the software that we're using now called Case Lines, very similar things happen, because to get on Case Lines, you need to send an email, and the person needs to respond to the email to load the matter on Case Lines, so you've got access to it. So there's still a manual process. It's not as easy as upload, click, case number, brilliant, and everything's automated. There's still a lot of manual intervention, and I think that's what's happening. And when the courts close, the problem is that there's no laptops at home that they can say, great, don't worry, we'll work remotely. There is no remotely. There's a skeleton staff and there's no staff. And that's pretty much what you're jumping between. So there's a backlog and then there's a terrible backlog. And you're just kind of hoping that the skeleton staff will be able to catch up that backlog as soon as possible. And that's the position we're in at the moment, I suppose.
One of my friends recently did her own divorce. Now, I promise I'm not that friend that won't do a divorce for a friend, but she was adamant to do her own divorce. And it was in May. And when I spoke to her afterwards, she said, I cannot believe that is how the court system works. Like everything is printed, everything is in paper, and the person on the other side of the counter, the clerk or the registrar, can pretty much decide whether they're going to help you or not, and how far and how much they're going to help you. And I said, yeah, that's how it works. That's how it works. And she said, it can't work like that, because I don't think people know that none of what happens in our courts happen electronically. Like seriously, in normal days when the courts run, you have a clerk or a registrar with like a pen filling in the case number. I kid you not. In the cool courts, we have like issue machines.
Yeah.
Which prints the number. That's like serious technology.
Automatic stamps that keeps changing the number automatically. Those were great, yeah.
That's amazing. That's like the high tech for lawyers in court. So everything is still manual. And that explains why we lose our court files. And that explains why things doesn't work as smoothly now. But I promise, if there's one thing that one amazingly potential positive thing that's going to come out of this whole COVID drama is the realization that the law has to change flippin' fast. The way we practice, the way courts function, I think this just highlighted it on a whole new level. And I think it's a good thing, Bruno. I think it's a pain to be the lawyers in this generation that has to bring the change. But the truth is, luckily, we know it should happen. And I think we are definitely some of the lawyers that's pushing for change and doing things differently in this time. So, all's well that ends well, right?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Well, it's just enduring until then, but absolutely, no, I agree with you. It does need to change, and it's going to. There's absolutely no choice. And depending how long COVID sticks around for, they're going to realize that they can't have courts constantly closing every time there's a case of corona. There's going to need to be some kind of remote working system or some kind of automation that takes it out of manual hands. And the judge can sit at home on a matter that's been done completely automated up until date of hearing. And then he just downloads the docs, reads through them, makes a ruling, and then moves on to the next one, which seems very possible because most of those things can be automated. It is just a matter of somebody doing it. And yeah, that's what we're waiting for.
Exactly. And especially with our judges, I mean, you don't easily get onto the bench while you are like in your early 30s. Judges, by definition, are typically some of our more senior citizens. So, I mean, our judges, there's a bunch of our judges that I think, oh my goodness, please just stay home. We need you. We really, really need you. So please stay home and stay healthy. And I think it's important for us to realize our judges are definitely, a majority of our judges are older, and we need them healthy. So we need them at home, but we need the law to catch up so we can keep our judges healthy.
No, absolutely. So our shorter webinar has turned into quite a longer webinar as per normal.
Every time.
So I don't know if we want to leave the topic of how to deal with settlements till next week. maybe just to let people know what we mean by this, so they can start thinking about it and asking questions on the group. Is are you in a situation now where you're negotiating with your tenant for them to vacate the property? Because if you are, have you considered how this is going to work out for you if there's a risk that the tenant doesn't move out? What time frames should you be looking at, and which ones cause the more risk? What are the costs associated with dealing it properly? So, for example, what we probably want to speak about is making a settlement in order of court versus not making it an order of court. So how are you dealing with your tenants? How would you like to deal with your tenants? What problems are you experiencing? And we'll maybe discuss that next week.
Yes, I think so. We can go into a lot of detail on it next week. I think for a little teaser for next week is exactly what you just said. And I think it's important, guys, remember a settlement agreement that's not in writing. I don't care how many witnesses you have, unless it's in writing, we're going to have a bit of a hard time to proving. So in the meantime, if you do have settlement agreements with your tenants or whatever, in the meantime, please make sure you reduce that to writing. I think we'll go into a lot more detail next week, Bruno, but I think in the meantime already that's a handy tip. And remember, you can't make a settlement agreement where you agree to contract out of legislation, for instance. You can't say, if you don't vacate, then I can move my family in with you. You can't do illegal things like that. But I think it's a good conversation in a lot of detail next week.
Absolutely. Cool. Excellent. Thanks so much, Sona.
Thank you. And thank you for the earlier recording, guys. I'm so sorry. But as I think you saw from this conversation between Bruno and I, that the way we practice looks a little different. So it keeps us a bit busier than usual, but we are happy that we were able to do it. I think it ended up being a very good conversation, Bruno.
No, absolutely.
But please, guys, post your questions during the week. I think everybody sort of got to understand how the Property Law Alliance page works by now. Post your questions. We're not going to answer your questions on the page, but we have a look at the questions and then we address it in our Wednesday webinar. So please, if there's any questions on this session, you're welcome to post the questions, and we will definitely see you next week, potentially live again.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bruno. Have a good week.
You too.
Bye-bye.